Welcome. This tutorial is going to walk you through some V-Ray and Animation Builder processes to create something like what you see right now. If you take a look at this animation, we have the ring rotating around by itself so that the reflections also rotate and that the ground plane doesn't rotate with it. This was a big request that people had since V-Ray came to us and all our animations were done through Rhino. Instead, we've got our new animation builder now with the Chicago bonus tools that will show you how to just rotate this ring without worrying about the ground plane going along for the ride. Okay, we have some tricks to do that. So you can see the reflections rotating. And now I just want to show you as it goes by that it actually reflects in the logo that we have below here. And that's a trick in V-Ray. There goes sparkle, sparkle. It's actually reflecting in this logo. So we're going to show you how to do that as well. Just some tricks that we have in the program to get this logo in between two ground planes to play with the transparency of the top ground plane so you can see through it and dimensionally down to the logo, and to play with the transparency of the logo itself. I'm sorry, not the transparency, the reflection of the logo itself, so you get those little sparkles in the logo as the ring goes by. This is actually a Hebrew verse that's I think you read it that way. It says, "I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine." It's just an example of something you can do with a bitmap that you find. This could be your store logo, your business card, anything you'd like that looks good with a ring rotating around it. And using the new animation builder, we can save it as a template. So let's begin. Okay, to start with, we're going to go out there and find the ring that we're going to use for this. Once we've got our file out there, we just want to take a look at this model, and right now we have poly surfaces, we have some things I've already meshed, we have a lot of different kinds of surfaces here. But to help the animation builder along, because it's got a lot of thinking to do, it'll help if everything is a mesh. That means that every time it has to make a new frame, it would have to mesh the object. So if it's already a mesh, it takes away all of that overhead from having to create the animation. So let's come in here and show you how I like to do that just really quickly. I turn off the gems, going to select everything, and in the utilities menu we have the mesh from NURBS object, which is going to create a mesh out of everything NURBS on screen. And so as you see, we have all these mesh settings, but we don't need to know what all these do because we can simply use the density. Halfway point is a good place to start with the mesh density. If it looks too faceted, you would go to a higher density, and if it looks if it's too much overhead still, you would go to a lower density. So let's go with halfway point, 0.5, and hit OK. Okay, now that takes a moment, so I pause the recording there. Now, what you see here is that you have the mesh and the poly surface out there at the same time. So it's very nice. It meshed everything for you, but we just compounded the problem because now we have more objects than we even started with. So I'm going to go ahead and use our Super Select tool, which is about one of my favorite tools. You click that, and the menu appears. You're going to select all meshes and simply hide them. Now the only thing left on screen are the poly surfaces. You're going to select them, delete them, all except our ring rail. Let's leave him out there. Is he there? There he is. We'll hide him too. We're going to need that for later. Now we can show. And now we've got just meshes left out. Meshes and our gems. Our gems should do just fine. I don't like to mess around with those too much because we want to make sure they look like diamonds still in the end. So we'll let those be. Job bag this version. Oh, that's for the next tutorial. Getting a little sneak preview there. Okay. And now we're ready to assign materials to it. If your final result is going to be a render, the way ours is, we're going to come into the render builder, V-Ray render. Did I tell you that this is my brother's engagement ring for his girlfriend? It's so pretty. I made it. I hope you like it. Okay, anyway, you're going to assign materials just the way you always do. So, okay, so we're going to take everything that we want to be a certain metal, right-click to select it, come into the metal in here, And we're going to assign whichever metal you want. This is a white gold ring. So we'll go down to white gold and assign it. Now, what you want to do when you're assigning these is not assign an alpha mask, okay? No alpha masking anywhere, because when you're done with the animation, you're going to see not just the animated, or not just the rendered images, but you're also going to see an alpha image for every one of those. And you're going to have to go through and delete them, and believe me, I've done it many times. So just make sure that alpha is unchecked for all of these options. Okay, we've done the metal. Let's go and select our gems. Go up to our gems up here. Find our diamonds. When you do this, remember, uncheck alpha. And we're going to go over to forced, because in a second we're going to lay this ring down on its side, and we want the gems to reflect really sparkly in that in the ground plane and in the image. We want them to look like gems when they're reflected. And notice we have all these options. We have forced. Okay, what forced does is no matter what kind of metal these gems are sitting in, they're going to look like diamonds. The other option here is normal. What normal is going to do, because this diamond material is actually a glass material, well, if you had glass that was partway intersected by metal, it would look a lot more dim. Okay, so normal, if they are intersected by metal, they're going to look a lot more dim. Forced is going to look like diamonds no matter what. But we want to go to complex. And what complex is going to let us do is get the reflections of those diamonds off the ground plane that we're about to have there. Okay, so we are going to choose complex. And we're going to apply. Make sure alpha's turned off. I did fast just for the sake of this animation, but if you really wanted to crank it up, you could do slow. I don't see the difference too much, but you're welcome to play around with those settings as well. Okay. The next step for us here, we kind of skipped a few steps, but that's not a problem. Before we add a ground plane, we're going to go into the side view. I'm going to show you how to rotate this so it just lays down nicely for our animation. Select everything, choose rotate. We don't need copy. And I like to zoom in to a spot right about here. What you're looking for is the right angle between the bottom of the ring and the side of the ring. Now, we don't have a square shank. If we did, we would click right there on the square angle. But since we have these lovely mill grain here, at least for the render we do, not for the finished piece, we have to click right here. Just picture a right angle, and that's where you click. Then we'll zoom out. So that's the first reference point. Our second reference point is the farthest away point of this ring, so the extra petal on the tulip. We want to line it up right here and click there. And our second reference point is holding down shift. We're just going to lay this down flat. And you do want to do this step before you assign a ground plane to make sure that it looks natural, that it's not floating above your ground plane or something when you do that. Okay, now your ring's laying down. This is another good stage at which to save it. Remember, if you save everything to a named job bag, any of the named job bags, you will be able to actually save all these render materials and pull it out and render it again. So I like to use the render job bag. Use a little plus sign to get an extra one out there. And if you just click in, everything goes in. You don't have to highlight it like you do with the typical job bags. And that includes all the materials we just assigned to our metal and to our gems. So let's talk about the ground planes here for a minute. We click here to put out a ground plane. Okay, same as always. And if you like, you can put this on a different layer color so that it's easier to select something you haven't used yet. Okay. Now what we're going to do is make the top ground plane transparent. And if you make it transparent all by itself, you don't put anything below it, it looks kind of weird. So you want to put something below it just to assign a matte white plain ground plane to, just so that you don't get any weird shadows and strange looks. It's like a gray or a black or something kind of environment that it's in, and sometimes it can look pretty funky. Okay, so we've got our two ground planes. The first one's going to be more transparent. The second one's going to just be our regular ground plane. And between them, we're going to put our logo. So we get that nice floating built into the background part of the look. Okay, and there's a ton of ways to do this, but this is just one fun way that I've found. So I am I'm open to suggestions for what you guys find too. Okay, to place our logo, I go to the picture frame tool. I'm then going to look for my pictures. Look through here and find this one. Okay, and remember when you're placing the picture frame, you're placing the two bottom edges of the picture. So hold down Shift and just get this at about the size and the location that you want for the render. Now, of course, it's floating up here, so we want to click and drag it down. And you might have noticed that doesn't work so well, so just use the Move tool and move it down. You want to move it down in between the two ground planes. We're just going to take a look in perspective of where it's located in relation to the ring and maybe move it over a little. I like the effect of really having the diamond reflect in that image. I just think it's super cool. This is the first my brother's using for his wedding, so you can see how special you can make this for your customer, really personalized. Okay, and we can move this. Just get it to where you'd want it so that it'll look good in perspective. Okay. Okay, now you may know that when you place a picture frame object, it'll render just like that in V-Ray. If you saw the other tutorial, the one I call Spy versus Spy, with the rings that run out from behind a secret passageway in the fireplace, that's how I did those. It's just really simple to add a picture frame. V-Ray sees it and it says, hey, this is supposed to be a picture, and it renders it just exactly like that image, which is so cool and easy to do. But you're going to see how to make that a little more complex should you need to, as in cases like this, because what I actually had, if you remember in that image, the diamonds reflected in the red. You could just see them sparkling off the red of that image. It's just that little extra bit that you might like to put into your render. So we're going to show you how to do that here. And we're going to talk about making this transparent. And to do all that, we're going to go into V-Ray Render Builder, kind of like in through the back door here. Okay, so let's first assign our materials to the ground planes. We're going to start with the bottom one. Go to the ground plane. Go to the white matte. And again, no alpha masking. Just go ahead and apply it. And that is, again, so that when we are seeing through the top one, we'll have something to see through too, and it won't look weird and shadowy. Okay, the next one I like to pick here is linear fall off, because I think it just has a nice effect. Has a really nice reflection in it already. You want to pick something as close as possible to the effect you're going for. So we don't go and choose one with all this extra stuff in it that we'd have to turn off, or one that's matte that we couldn't get the nice reflection out of. So we're going to pick the one closest to the one we're going for here and simply apply it. Okay. The next thing to do is to open your materials editor, which lives right here. And what this is doing is assigning everything that's already in the scene. So as you can see, we have the diamonds, we have the linear fall-off plane, we have the white matte plane, and we have the white gold that we've just applied. So that makes it really easy. You can see everything that you've already applied, and you can kind of tweak it if you want. So in the case of the transparency of the top layer, we want to get that top layer transparent so we can see through to our logo here. We're going to enter the linear fall off. And what you see when you open this up is the material and the nature of the material. So everything in the right-hand column here is referring to how this material was made up. So you can see it has a reflection layer to make it glassy and look really reflective. It has a diffuse layer. Diffuse is just the color, okay, and actually it has two colors, the white and the blue, that are making this up. We have some other options that were used to create this particular image, and if you had any maps, you would see them selected here. So in the case of the wood, you have a map that's making it look like the wood color, okay? Or the wood texture, rather. Okay. So what we're going to look for to play with is our transparency settings. Now as you look, we have the white and the blue layer, so we want to change them both. If we just made one transparent, the other one would be opaque. We would not have a good result. So to adjust the transparency, we just click on the transparency swatch and we get this color wheel that appears. Really familiar, right? If you've played with DG or even Matrix a bit, you've seen this guy, okay? What transparency is doing, this black setting here, black means opaque and white means completely see-through, as if it wasn't there at all. So we don't want it all the way to white because that would be too much. We want it semi-transparent, so we'll pick a nice gray. Did it listen to me? It didn't listen to me. Notice that it doesn't listen to you unless you hit OK. then it'll change our swatch gray. So remember, all this transparency is saying is black is opaque and white is transparent, and somewhere in between is semi-transparent. So you just want to make both diffuse layers semi-transparent. So both colors, blue and white, will be semi-transparent. And it's as easy as that. Okay. Let's talk about our logo next. We have this little object out here, which, as we know, will just render like a like the logo that it is if we just leave it out there. However, we want to assign that reflective quality to it. So notice that we have an extra material out here that we haven't used at all. It's called default V-Ray material. Well, rather than changing this up in case we might need to go back and use it again, we're going to first make a copy of it and then play with it. Okay, that way we've always got this one left over so we didn't ever really ruin anything. And by the way, these are unique to each job that you do. So every time you open up V-Ray and play around in here, you're going to get a new default V-Ray material. So it's not like you're going to ruin it or something. It'll just be easier to go back if we simply copy this instead of playing around with the one in here. So we're going to first right click on it, tell it duplicate. Then we get V-Ray material 1. So this is the one we're going to play with. Right now, all this has is a diffuse layer, as you can see. Okay. And it's telling us it's gray in color and it's perfectly opaque. Rather than gray in color, we want to apply this very image to this very surface. Okay, so inside of V-Ray, we want to say, you surface, have you bitmap on you. And the way to do that is with the map button. Okay, so the map button will override the color. We have either color or map, which is bitmap. And we say, no, I don't want the color, I want the map. So we double click the map to open it, and now you get this other menu here, and there isn't much you can do with this. There's no buttons, there's no fun stuff over here until you pull down type and tell it bitmap. So this is kind of a generic menu until you tell it what kind of menu you want it to be. It could be any of these kinds. We want to say nope, we just want it to be a bitmap menu. Okay. Then you get all this fun stuff over here. You're going to see another little letter M, and this is where you actually load the bitmap. We'll go in and find the bitmap that we chose. It's got to be exactly the same bitmap as this. And we're making this a texture map. Okay, this means it's going to map right onto the surface. If we made it an environment map, it would look as though this surface was sitting in an environment. Okay, just the way we apply an HDRI environment, that was rimmed with these letters. So that wouldn't work for this effect. So we're going to choose texture. We also want to make sure there's only one of them. They're not offset at all because it's going to fit one-to-one on the surface that we placed. We know that. And we don't want it to be tiled. Probably wouldn't tile anyway. But we're going to hit apply. And now the little m turns to a big M to say, hey, I've got a map on here. Instead of using this color, I'm using this map. Now that's great, but we really haven't done anything other than what V-Ray already does. It sees our little picture frame and it maps this on there. Now we want to add some reflectivity to this layer. If you notice over here, our reflection layer is dim, and we don't have it in this list, so to add it to this list, we're going to click it, we're going to right-click it, and we're going to say Add New Layer. Now we get the little plus sign, we have a reflection layer, we can also open it in this menu here by just clicking it. Okay, so after we add it, we get the option to click it, and now it's reflective. It was as easy as that. Okay, so now we're going to be able to get those little sparkles reflecting off the diamond right into our logo. Subtle, but it's a really nice trick, especially if you're making this for an in-store presentation on a TV or monitor, maybe an ad or a website. And the last thing we have to do is get this material onto this object. How do we do that? We're going to select the object in the viewports, right-click the name of the material, and say Apply Material to Objects. It's as easy as that. Okay, now it's on there. It doesn't deselect itself like the rest of V-Ray. We just trust that it's on there. Okay, and let's take a look at what we have wrought here. I believe the last step we need to do is add an HDRI environment. I always forget which one I add, so we might play around with those a little. Okay, we get the viewport active that we want to render, and we hit render. That takes a little bit of time, so actually I have paused it to save you guys the headache. But as you can see, oh, we've just got a little bit of it now, but you'll really see when it goes by, as you could see in our our animation from earlier that's really going to sparkle off this logo. And you can change the transparency if you want, if it doesn't look transparent enough, if you want to see more of the logo. But I think this is a pretty nice effect, especially because you can see a lot of the reflectivity of the ring in the ground plane right here, which is a really super effect. Really nice and has a lot of subtlety to it. So we're going to keep it and continue in our tutorial here. In fact, if you want to save this, because it's so pretty. Don't worry about this, it's going to come back to life. This is also a good time to save. Everything, so you don't lose your work. And it's going to save all those V-Ray settings. Everything we set up in the materials editor is now saved, so not to worry. And we're now ready to proceed to your animation builder. Okay. In your tools menu, you'll see our hibiscus icon, our longing to live somewhere other than freezing cold Iowa. Click on the stock animation builder, and I'll take just a moment to open this as well. Okay, and in here you're going to click new because you've done all the animation tutorials and you're not scared of how this thing works. It's just great. Okay. For the number of frames, I did this in 240 frames, and that means about 8 seconds. I did it originally in 120, and it looked a little fast for me. So remember to divide it by 30 to get the number of seconds, and that would be 8 seconds. Yes, I had to practice that before I started this tutorial so that I didn't look like I didn't know math. Okay, the animation size, my viewports on my monitor about 600 by 400, so that's how I know that it's going to set up real well. This might be a little tricky to do with the size that I make these videos at, but we'll just play with it. 600 by 400 works well. You can also test it, so not to worry. And what I like to do for posing this viewport is, let's go ahead and rotate this and just make sure you can see the whole entire thing. So I'm just rotating the viewport to make sure that I won't cut off any of the ring at the top up here when it rotates around. And so far, it looks pretty good. The other thing I want to see, because this is to show all my brother's friends how beautiful his ring is that he gave his wonderful fiance, is so that we can see all the designs on the ring. So I make sure that it's posed at just the right angle, and I just kind of eyeball it here. I'm not going to worry. As I move this across pretty straight as I can, that I'll be able to see the whole design of the head, which is what we want to show off because the tulip is our favorite flower. Isn't custom jewelry design great? Never appreciated that so much until now. Okay, let's go into the edit menu. And this is where we can set the viewport camera points to be exactly that of the active viewport. So it's going to start the render at this view of the ring. So we're going to do use camera viewport camera points, current viewport camera points. There we go. There's our 600 by, oh, move. Oh dear, don't crash. There's our 600 by 400 frame. Okay, and if you want to test again, you can just make sure you can see the whole thing in there. Okay. Okay. The other thing we're going to do here is to actually trick the builder a little. And what I mean is I'm going to start with 2 animated groups so that I can put in another object and get the pivot point off of that. Because just to show you, let's grab our ring, put it in the object box. That'll be our only object to animate in this animation. Okay, we'll put a pivot point out there, and as you see, it starts in the center of the object. We're going to rotate this 360 degrees in the X direction. And we'll just go back to one group, and we'll show you why we have to trick the builder here. Over in Animate, if we begin to scrub, which is simply to click and drag this, first of all, I always choose the wrong thing, X, Y, or Z. I love to do that. Okay, secondly, you can even see now that it's rotating kind of screwy around its axis. That's definitely not what we wanted. So I'm going to go back to configure, and we'll try the Z here. Is it Z? I think it's Y. We should have made Kent do this tutorial since he's an old hat at animation. That's what I wanted to show you. Okay, so it's rotating around its y-axis. However, it's taken a look at the bounding box of this piece, which has this big old thing sticking off the side here. So if you were to rotate this in a bounding box perfectly surrounding this piece, it would rotate on an axis, kind of like it has this big thing out here. So it's going to accommodate for that on the other side here and get totally not what we want. Okay, so we're going to go back into configure, and that's just the nature of the beast. That's how the pivot points work. And if you stay tuned for our next animation on frame scripts, you'll be able, or our next tutorial on frame scripts within Animation Builder, you'll be able to see how to assign things like rotate. Pick a point of rotation, rotate around that point. But for right now, we're just going to cheat a little. So we're going to go down to 2 groups instead, and we're going to put in the whole big ground plane. Now we're not going to rotate the ground plane because that's a pain. It looks like all the reflections follow the ring and the ring isn't really the thing spinning and nobody likes that. However, we are going to, okay, so we only put this in here so we get the pivot point. So we hit the pivot point, we bring it out, and now this point represents the center of the plane. And when the plane rotates, it simply rotates around a flat point. And that's what we want. Okay, we don't want it, we want to see the bounding box of the plane, which is just a flat object in space. We don't want it to calculate for this thing whose center would be somewhere like this shaped, okay, as you saw earlier. So we want to take this pivot point and we want to move it. You might need to hide some stuff in here so that your buddy doesn't get in the way, your little ring there. Move it with the point O snap on. Okay, again, you go away. From the point at the P, at the center of the pivot, to the center O snap of your ring rail. Because remember, you want this ring rotating around its center point of its ring rail, not its own center point. Okay, so we want to turn on the center O snap, and you might need to get rid of the point O snap, and just leave it right there at the center of the ring rail. Lovely. That was easy, huh? So we simply cheated it by using this pivot point, moving it to where we wanted, and there's probably a better way to do that, but you'll have to ask Chris. That's the way I discovered. We're going to go ahead and bump this back down to 1 object because we don't want to animate the plane. But now that we've got the pivot point correctly, we can jump into the animate side of this guy and see if we did this right. And again, I love to choose the wrong direction to rotate it in, so you can just call me X, Y, and Z deficient or something. There she goes. All the way around the circle. Perfect. Okay. The last thing we want to do is think about whether we're going to loop this or not. Okay, we can do this in 2 ways, and for right now, let's just make every single frame, and then when we get back to the whatchamacallit, Movie Maker, forgive me, it's Friday afternoon. When we get back to the Movie Maker, we'll be able to see 2 different ways to create this final animation. Okay, which one is looped and the other one ends with, or you could actually start it with, the still frame of the ring. So we'll see how to do both of those. But in the meantime, you want to just choose where to save this, and I make a new folder every time because you don't want a ton of files out there called file prefix. You'll never know which one is supposed to go into your render, and it'll make you very unhappy. Believe me, I've tried. So go over into Matrix in your animation folder. Go ahead and make yourself a new folder. Call it whatever you want. And hit OK. And now you can check and make sure it's saved there, tutorial animation. Then you can call the file prefix whatever you want. If you make a new folder, you forget to change the file name, no big deal. The other thing I want to show you while we're in here is the file, save to model. You want to save all these settings. And remember, when you save the model, you'll also save all the V-Ray settings. So you are all ready to go with a new, with this saved model. Anytime you need to open it up and render it again, make an animation of it again, you're all set. So, and with it saved, you're now ready to create your animation. So you go over to the animate side. You could also, back on the configure side, you could save this as a template if you wished, and we cover that in another tutorial. So Back on the animate side, you want to make sure you have render selected, and you want to make sure you have a lot of time on your hands. This last one I did took me 3 hours to render, so definitely don't do it in the middle of a workday. Especially because if you start to do other stuff on your computer, you're like, oh, well, no, while this is thinking, I'll just browse the internet or check my email. It will just stop creating the renders. It'll just kind of poop out on you. So make sure, oops, make sure you don't do that. So leave it to render overnight at the end of the day. Something like that. Go play a golf game, something like that. And you'll hit record, and the next thing that'll pop up after about 3 hours is Movie Maker, so we'll go look at that. Movie Maker actually lives in your Utilities folder, which you get to by your C drive, your program files, Matrix 6.0, and Utils. So you can just open this separately, like say you don't have Matrix open, you want to just make a movie, and you know that you've saved all your image files to another folder based on this render here. So what you're going to do is go over into Pick Files, and it does this for you, or it should do this for you automatically after making your render. However, I've had some hiccups where it says, pick more than one file. You can't make a movie, and Movie Maker just closes. But not to worry, you've already saved 240 renders over in your animation folder there. That's what we set up to save. So it's real easy to go in there and get them. So it's not like they're gone or anything. We're going to go over into your Matrix, My Documents, Matrix 6, Animation, find that folder that you created, and we've actually done this in a different folder, but that's okay. Let's find the latest one from today. There she is. And they're all named with your file prefix and the number of the frame that they are. So you just select the first one, hit open. Notice it says, this appears to be the start of an image sequence. Do you want to import the sequence? You just tell it yes, and it imports all 240 frames. Now remember we said we were going to make a looping one and then a still one. So let's go with the looping one first. It's really easy. You would just delete the last, select it and delete it. And you would go ahead and assign the frames per second. We like to use 30. The quality size, we like to use 2. It's totally up to you. And hit Make Movie. And that will make you this little guy. Okay? After, again, quite a long time. So make sure you have some time for it to think by itself without you. I love to watch the reflections go by in the red writing. That has got to be my favorite part of this whole gig. Okay. The other way we're going to create this animation is we're going to go ahead and put the last frame in again. So pick files, back to our same folder where all those files live. Grab the last frame, which is the same as the first frame. So you could just grab the first frame if you want. Hit open. Now, this appears to be the start of an image sequence. Do you want to import the sequence? No. It's going to ask you how many frames you want to hold the final render for. Okay? And this could even be cool because if you loop it, it's going to start up the animation again. So it'll hold it for a few seconds and then start rotating again. So that could be a really nice effect. So let's go ahead and choose how many frames you want to hold it for. This whole thing's 8 seconds. Maybe you want to hold it for 2 frames and make the whole thing, or 2 seconds and make the whole thing 10 seconds. 2 seconds times 30 frames a second is 60 seconds. That math I can handle. So you just put in as many seconds as you want times 30 frames per second. Okay, maybe you want to hold it for 5 seconds. That'll be 150. Just doesn't matter. We'll do our 60. We'll do our 2 seconds and see how that comes out. Hit OK. And you'll notice that it'll add 60 versions of the last frame. Now you can loop this or not, whatever you want, and then it'll begin by moving and it'll stop at the end. Or you could do the same thing right at the beginning. You can import, pick file, the very first one, which again is the same as the very last one, where it says this appears to be the start. Do you want to import the sequence? No. Ask how many frames. Hold it at the beginning for 2 seconds. And you'll get, oops, I did it at the end by mistake. So I didn't to go. Bad Movie Maker. Okay, let's move those up to the top. It's the same, so it doesn't matter. 60's a lot. Delete them. Delete the selected ones. Let's put our little cursor at the top this time. When we pick the file, Pick the first file, open, import the sequence, no, import it for 30 frames, yes, and now you've added those 60 to the beginning of the animation. That's what I was trying to do all along. You want to see how that one looks? Let's take a look. When the working thingy goes away and the little movie maker guy comes back up, let's find the last one. There, after 2 seconds it starts up on its way. And at the end of the animation, it'll hold again for 2 seconds. That's kind of a nice effect. And you can loop it. So you've got, actually it holds for 4 seconds at the end of the animation because it goes back to the beginning. So, because we've added them to the beginning as well. So there you go, and if you don't like the loop, you just stop it from looping. The other really nice thing this does is that if your customer doesn't have Flash, for whatever reason, you can go to File, Create Projector. And this creates a little exe file. Just make sure you zip that file up before you email it to them. So they got to have WinZip. So you got one or the other, WinZip or Flash. But that is a couple different ways to create this animation using some V-Ray tactics here. And let's go ahead and play that again. I'm so excited for the way it reflects in the writing. Really, really beautiful. So if you guys make these, definitely post them on the forum and show us what you've done.